Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Namaste Center in Hendersonville, North Carolina. It's December 4th, 2011, and we are really blessed today to have a wonderful speaker joining us, a wonderful teacher, Dr. Brian Crissey, who I've known for a few years now, and his wife Pam is also a fellow minister of mine. And you actually participated in, I got to know you really well when you came through the mastermind class last year and a while back. And we really bonded as a group, and you had so many wonderful creative ideas, which you really took off with and even created bigger events at an even bigger level. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But I would like to let everyone know that he and his wife are founders and owners of Granite Publishing, which publish wonderful books such as this, Zeta Messages, and other books that are more, I would say, esoteric type books that maybe you don't find in your Hay House collection or some of those, but rather this is the real underground stories, the books that they publish. So really neat books, and really grateful and commend you for the wonderful work that you and your wife do, because it is important that we share these messages, because these messages are really so relevant in our time today. So I thank you for being here, Brian, and look forward to having our little conversation.
Thank you, Shar, for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great.
Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. So, on your website, which is fifthworld.com,
That's one of them.
5th world.com, on the front page, homepage, you talk about the Hopi prophecies for one. And then down further, you talk about the Mayan calendar. And it's, as we talk about often in this group, there's a lot of wild stuff happening on planet Earth these days. So you want to give us just a brief summary of what the Hopis and the Mayans and other civilizations are telling us that is happening?
Sure. Long ago, the Hopis had some prophecies given by their sacred leaders, and one of them has to do with the change from the fourth world into the fifth world by their accounting. Some people say it's from the fifth to the sixth, but it doesn't matter what you call them. There's a change that is projected. Doesn't mean it will happen, but is there anybody here that thinks it's not happening? I'll talk to you later. It's happening. There are things changing everywhere. Everything that is unsustainable is falling apart. From the housing market collapse to debt crisis in Europe to pollution and the whales and on and on and on. Global warming, all that stuff. Okay, there's things happening, but what we did here with the fifthworld.com and some of the other related websites that we are working with is to use the idea of the fifth world as an organizing tool for coordinating people and their efforts towards making a better world. The 2012 thing comes from at least one major interpretation of the Mayan calendar, which goes way, way back, and it's a calendar most of you are familiar with. It's wheels within wheels within wheels, and every day goes ka-chink and things line up a little differently. And when they created that calendar a long time ago, its beginning was way earlier than any knowledge we have of the Mayans. And the end date of that, by most people's reckoning, is the end of December next year, on the 12th of December. There is another major interpretation that says that it ended at the end of October this year, in which case the world has already ended, and so you don't have to worry about it. And on we go to the next thing. So a lot of people ask about the December 12th, December 21st, 2012 date, and what to expect, and light's going to go out, and all sorts of things. Well, it's probably going to be a lot like the Y2K event. You know, it's just the next day, December 22nd, is going to be a lot like December 21st, I think, and on we go. But from the perspective that we've been developing here, I think the way you can look at that period of time is that this is a time probably of maximum change between the fourth and the fifth world. And it's not that particular date. It's like every day that passes, there are more things going on, more things changing and falling apart, and houses foreclosed and everything, all these things going on. It will probably be at its peak in terms of things changing at the end of next year. And then it continues to change according to our expectation, but in a more positive way. And the fifth world, or whatever it is that comes after these changes, begins to be more observed, more relevant to people, things you can actually see and touch. And so one thing that we have done is to look at this transitional phase between the fourth world and the fifth world, and we break it into three parts. And the first part, which is what we're in right now, we call transition, and that is the changing of ideas. People realizing, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, here's a good idea. It's just a lot of understanding of things. And then somewhere it begins to change into the middle phase, which we call the transformation phase. And this is a phase where things actually change. And the ways in which we interact with each other begin changing. The ways economic models change. The changes are happening during this middle period. The third period, which is after the 2012 point, we call that the transformation phase. And this is the, not transformation, but the transmutation phase. And this is where the energetic change occurs on the planet. The kinds of things that you've been talking about for years. The vibrational level of people and other things around the world rises up. And there's all kinds of interesting talk about how is this going to work and all this sort of thing. And it seems that nobody knows anything. That's something we'll talk about later on today. But there seems to be a splitting happening here. And the transmutation phase will be enjoyed by people such as people in the room here today who are open to lifting their energies and going to a higher plane and doing things in a better way and moving that energy and riding with that. There will be the others, the laggards, so to speak, who don't know that this is going on and will just complain more about the things that don't work. And those folks will probably stay with their own lower energies, and in some sense these two sets of people are going to split. And I think we're on the bus to go with the higher energies, and that's our plan anyway. But that's kind of a general way to look at this. We do like to go back and look at the phases of change of a butterfly, for example, and the metamorphosis cycle of a butterfly. And we are currently in transition, which is more or less like the caterpillar. And at some point we go into the transformational period, which is kind of the pupa, cocoon sort of thing. Then as we move into transmutation, that's the butterfly emerging. So we're all just crawling along as caterpillars, but we're going to fly pretty soon. So keep your seatbelts on.
Well, when you say that, there's going to be those of us that are aware and make conscious choices that we're going to fly, and the rest may just muddle along in the misery and suffering and blame game.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, isn't it necessary for them to get it?
This is an interesting topic, and I don't think, again, anybody really knows. But one of the things we'll talk about in the seminar has to do with our emerging understanding of what the true history is of the Earth. And it goes back, apparently, a lot farther than, say, the Egyptian pyramids. I mean, those dates are measured in thousands of years. The real history of the Earth apparently is measured in hundreds of millions of years. It goes way back. And there were civilizations that rose and fell on this planet many times during this period. And it is our understanding, and this comes through Patricia Cota-Robles, who is one of the leading spiritual leaders on the planet at this time. She has this idea that there was a time when the spiritual hierarchy of the Earth looked out into the universe and observed the various other planetary civilizations, not only in this solar system and all around the galaxy and other galaxies, and many of them were at approximately kind of this stage that we're at. And the civilization said, oh boy, here's where we fly. how come all those grubs aren't flying? And there's a lot of grubs, and she calls them the laggards. And these are souls that have the same kind of structure that we do. They're sparks of God, as we all are. They happen to inhabit what some of these visitors call soul containers. We are typically housing our souls in a model we call Homo sapiens, which may or may not be discontinued. We'll find out about that. But in any case, there are many of these models around the universe, and in some of these other civilizations, they got to this point and they were ready to fly, but they were held back by these laggards. And they worried and they chewed on this for a long time. And the spiritual hierarchy of the earth said, look, we're a young planet, and we are. You know, this solar system's only about, we think, 4 or 5 billion years old. The universe is about 12 billion years old. There's a lot of difference there. A lot of folks got started before we did. We're kind of young. And so our spiritual hierarchy at some point says, hey, I think we could have some selfless soul work here. We're generous folks. We'll invite your laggards to come onto our planet with us. And they can learn from our higher energies and better ways of doing things. And that'll give them the opportunity to learn from us. And together we will all transform and we'll fly together. And the rest of you can go on to your higher things and we'll take care of the laggards. And it was an interesting idea, but the road to hell, you know. So we still have these laggards, and these are souls that are on the earth with us that have shown themselves lifetime after lifetime to be inept at spiritual development. They can't do it, they're not interested in it, they're caught up in the lower vibrations and have no indication they're ever going to be able to get out of it. So in many cases, instead of our teaching the laggards how to do it, some of the naive, impressionable souls of earth said, oh, that's kind of fun, let's do that, and there was a migration back towards the laggards. So this was the fall from grace, basically, and we got ourselves into kind of a pickle. So take this all the way forward to this point, and this is the split again. The laggards are probably going to stay there, and the people who can emerge and transmutate to higher energies will do so. But the question you ask, is it our responsibility to reform the laggards? And that's really the question. And I suspect that would be nice, but it may be beyond our capabilities, and this time we may have to just go without a good set of these folks.
Well, actually, the question wasn't that exactly, but you answered it. It really is, does it benefit us for them to get it? And, you know, A Course in Miracles,
Sure.
for example, says that until all of us awaken, none of us fully awaken. So my awakening depends on the laggards getting it at some point. I mean, when we sort of all come back to that state of remembrance of our true nature, which is only heaven.
Yeah.
It includes them too.
Well, I would like to include them, and the danger is that they are the anchor that keeps us from flying, and that's, I think, in some kind of a choice that we make as a planet and as spiritual beings. And what if they are just intransigent and will stay there in the mud and refuse to get out, and we then have a choice of either getting in the mud with them or flying. You know?
All right, I do understand.
I think we fly at some point. I mean, we've given them millions of years.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to offer the possibility then that they're not coming along with us yet.
Yet.
Okay, so let's say yet.
Yeah.
So moving on is, how about, where do the extraterrestrials fit into all of this? I know that there's a camp that thinks, oh, absolutely they exist, and they're real and they're here with us. And some people say, oh, that's a bunch of hooey. And I know you think that they do exist. You know that they exist. I wouldn't even say you think. Tell us a little bit of background of your knowing of what they're here for and how they're going to help us through this.
Okay, well, jumping forward, we will conclude this afternoon that we are all extraterrestrials. Our eternal souls happen to be occupying a soul container that is of this model. These folks you're talking about have other models, We may be the Yugos, they may be the Cadillacs or something, but we're all souls in soul containers. So you look out there at the universe, and I don't know if anybody saw any of the NOVA programs recently on the possibility of life in outer space and all that sort of thing. But what they found was that as you look at almost any place, you find the necessary prerequisites for life. And their conclusion was that it's quite probable that life is prevalent and abundant, throughout the universe. So there are millions of different kinds of beings out there, and there's commerce and there's trade and all that sort of thing. And one of the things that advanced civilizations who have 1 billion or 2 or 4 or 6 years on us do is to figure out how to move around out there. And we found out recently that travel faster than light is possible. Einstein was wrong, and we did that. Some of you probably saw the news about that. How that's reacted to in the scientific community is, and in other news. Wait a minute. We just saw a little glimmer here. It is possible to have communication and travel, and other folks have been doing this. And when these folks come to some Garden of Eden like this planet used to be, and say, oh, this is nice, it's got oxygen and water and all that sort of thing, why don't we take that monkey-like thing over there, and we'll kind of do our genetic engineering on it, put some of this in there and put some of this in there, and then kind of teach them a little bit and let them go and come back in a million years, and oh, look, they've done some, oh, we've got so much. So we do genetic engineering. They apparently have done genetic engineering on us. One of the things we'll talk about this afternoon is the Human Genome Project, and some of the researchers on that project who noticed that we only have 2 strands out of our 12 that are activated, and wonder, well, what about, God is so inefficient, or maybe there's other things going on there, and we're beginning to suspect that all living beings share this pool, and pieces of it can be turned on and off, and we know very little about it, but some other folks know a lot more. So what these researchers have concluded from the Human Genome Project is that each of us has ET genetics in our makeup. And that part of this program, this genetic program that is in our bodies, was not programmed on this planet. These are not woo-woo people making strange claims. These are scientists in the Human Genome Project that concluded this. We all have these genetic components in our DNA. Where did that happen? How did it happen? You go back, well, okay, I mean, you don't have flour in the bowl unless somebody put the flour in the bowl. Well, who put the flour in the bowl? And you go back and you say, well, there's a lot of these people out there. Some of them encountered this planet at some point. They left some of their memory in our genetics. We evolved from there. And you get back into some of the other researchers. Some of you have probably come across Zecharia Sitchin and his books. And he looked back at the clay tablets of Babylon and Sumer and Ur and all these, and found that the interpretations that he was putting on it were that a lot of these early civilizations had an ongoing interface with visitors from other places, people we would call ETs. You say, well, I don't believe that, I'm going to go to the Bible, and you turn it up and it says, okay, and the sons of God entered into the daughters of men, and, excuse me, more detail on that, please? No. What was that? Yeah. You start looking at all these ancient traditions, and you find, once you open your eyes, that they're talking about the same thing. There's been a long and rich interface between our people on this planet and other people from other places. And somewhere along the line, we decided that it was probably appropriate to forget all of that. And if they don't land on the White House lawn, then they don't exist. And even if they did, it'd be a Fox News hoax or something. You'd make up something, okay? And so you wonder, well, why is the common understanding that such things don't exist? Why is that? And this is what we're looking at this afternoon, the implications of the ET presence. And one of the, there was a a project by the Brookings Institute that looked at what would happen if knowledge like this got out into the society. And one of their conclusions was, of all the various kinds of folks that might be most seriously impacted by this kind of knowledge, it's the scientists and engineers. Because they think they know, and they will find out that they don't. And that's not good for them. And probably a second class, I think, would be the politicians in various countries around the world, because they derive their power from the existence of arbitrary boundary lines around this planet that will eventually become worthless. They derive their power by scaring people and having those people come to them for protection from, you name it, evil aliens or something. When this kind of information comes out, that we are not nations fighting against each other, but we are one planet with one species, one dominant species here, with many friends out there that want us to fly. Okay, that's what's coming out. It is not of great interest to the Idi Amins of the world to have anybody talking like that. It's not of great interest to most of the politicians in the United States to suggest anything like this. So you look back through the history, the recent history since Roswell. Everybody familiar with the Roswell incident and all that stuff? Okay, well, in 1947, there was something that happened in the Southwest, and a farmer out on his ranch came across this collection of clutter, a big gouge through the earth and all kinds of strange metal and stuff like that. And some of the I-beams had hieroglyphics on them and all kinds of weird things. And so they reported it to the news, and the news came out and said, U.S. Army Air Force captures flying saucer on ranch in New Mexico. They had a picture there and all this stuff. Well, the Army descended on that. All the evidence disappeared. The next day was, well, about this weather balloon.
Yeah.
You know, and it kind of started there. So with that lie, and probably other lies before that, there came a choice. People who made that lie, from that day on, had the choice of saying, okay, I'm a liar, here's the truth, or not. Once you admit that you've lied about something, why should anybody believe what you're going to say next?
Right.
So they're going to lose their credibility as soon as they admit that they've been lying about it. So they didn't want to do that. So it seems that there was some kind of idea that, well, this is just for the good of the people. Let's cover this up until we understand what's really going on. And they never have understood what's going on, so therefore they've never let it out.
Well, you know, Brian, when you talk about Roswell is, you know, as far as disclosure goes, one person who's been very vocal is Ed Mitchell, the astronaut.
Sure.
And he, of course, started the Noetic Sciences,
Right.
and he Institute for Noetic Science. And he said, well, his story, which I thought was fascinating, was he was a teenager in Roswell when that happened. Did anyone even know he was born in Roswell? I didn't until he came out and said this. And he said that above that, what happened was when that crash happened, his grandfather owned the funeral home. And so he went with his grandfather they called him to pick up those bodies, and that's what got him interested in the space program. So now so that's where and it's actually, you can search that on the internet. I mean, you can find that interview when he says that.
Yeah.
So, you know, and many astronauts have claimed to have had extraterrestrial experiences, you know, when they've been in space. So it is something I think that behooves us now.
Right.
And I think that the way things are moving, that, you know, it is just a matter of time before we have to accept some of it as a society.
That's right. So what we're going to be doing this afternoon is looking at the implications of the moment that we do that as a society or as a global people. We say, well, yes, there are other living beings out there. They seem to have been here. What do we do now? And there are implications in all kinds of different areas, and 2 hours is too little to even scratch the surface very deeply on that. But Lynn's here as a psychologist. There's psychological aspects of some of this. People who have been thought to be stark raving mad because they hear voices in their heads, and the psychologists, no offense, Lynn, come to them and say, well, take this pill, or this is a multiple personality disorder, or, you know, whatever the thing is. Those are attempts to understand something that's multidimensional, at least in some of these cases, with a very limited dimensionality. And these pills are not going to do anything. Some of these folks get locked up. One of our early authors was locked up for a long time because she was communicating with an ET, and doctors thought it was craziness. So the only way she got out of the hospital was to lie. Say, well, I'm good now. I don't hear any voice. Shut up. I don't hear anything. They let her out, and years later, Pam and I found her and spent many hours with her. It's a very interesting
I
person.
thought you were going to say, and years later, I married Pam.
She finally got out. She wasn't the one I was talking about. Both Pam and I did during our teenage years have close encounters with something that seems quite likely to have been extraterrestrial craft. And while we don't have any memories of talking with any of these beings in three-dimensional reality, our life has been a series of very interesting events where things have flowed into us, and the books like the ones that you have here, the Zeta Message, are like that. This is only the most recent, but there's a whole stream of these, and Lauren here was after another one, which was From Birth to Rebirth, which was a physician from Las Vegas who found that he could actually heal people more effectively by getting into hypnotic regression and letting them go back to the former life, does that really exist, where this problem actually occurred. And people would go back and they would say, oh yeah, I was a gladiator in Rome, and this and that happened, and my arm got cut off, and oh, that's why my arm hurts in this life. You know, it's that sort of thing. People would, once they understood where they're from, and what a lot of these symptoms would go away. So that was a book that Lauren
Like
was
Brian
after.
Weiss's book, too. Many Lives,
Right,
Many Masters.
that's right. Very similar.
Yeah.
It's all the truth comes in many facets. These books here, a pair of gals in Australia, whose soul container last time was a 4-foot-tall gray Zeta, gray skin, big eyes, and so on, and they died in the Roswell crash, or one of them at that time. Their bodies, their soul containers were ruined at that point. They didn't have a spare, and so they decided to reincarnate. Does that really exist? They decided to reincarnate in Australia as human beings to assist us in this transformation so we can all become butterflies. And they, the two of them and the daughter of one of them, are what we call star seeds. They are people some of whose former lives were lived out in places other than the Earth. And they're here to assist us. So at some point, they got in touch with us, as most of our authors do when these kinds of things come out. And this goes all the way back to when we were talking to the gal in the mental hospital. We talked to the alien or the ET or whatever it was she was talking to, and asked that person at one point, well, how, Pam and I have some computer background, how can we be of most service to this planet at this time, since it seems like this is a needy planet? And the voice came back and said, we need publishers. And we said, well, aren't there enough publishers in the world? I mean, I see a lot of them out there. Yeah, but they're not getting the truth out. They're not putting out what needs to be put out there. And so we said, well, how are we supposed to know that? I mean, we're not experts in anything. How do we know what to publish? And the voice said, it will come. It came. I mean, for 20 years now. You know,
How many books now?
we lost count. We stopped counting. 60, 65, maybe different books like this, of different kinds. And it never made us millionaires, but at some point you have to make choices, and we chose to publish what the world needs rather than what it wants to buy. So it makes it tough, but the information is there. And while we're on that, there's three boxes over here, free books for you. The ones on the top there, at this end, they are excess inventory that we have. No charge. Take one of each. If they're not all gone, take 2 of each, get them out into the world, give them to people, Christmas gifts, whatever. I don't want to take them back, you know.
We're on the Oprah show.
Everybody gets a book. 3 books.
They always supposed to jump up and down the screen, yeah. There you go. Well, Brian, you know, we could go on for hours, I'm sure, but this is wonderful. I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners what your website is.
Okay. The new one, which I want to bring your attention to, is granite-planet.net. Granite as in the rock, hyphen, not underscore, space, or dot or anything. Granite-planet.net. And this is our coordinating site for people on the same page as we are, spiritual folks, others who want to fly, you know, as we go through the transformation, transmutation. So there's a lot of different activities going on there that are coordinated in one place. And if you get to that one site, you'll also be able to get to our publishing sites. You'll get to the Fifth World Fund.org site, which is the one that derived from the mastermind class that you put out, which uses this a mandala based on the crop circle that's on the front of that book there as a global healing tool. The gals that wrote these books told us that this particular crop circle, which came in about 10 days or so before the 9/11 event, was a gift to humanity. It's a global healing mandala, and it's powerful. The sacred geometry in it has power. And so we have extracted that image, we've colored it with the chakra colors, and we're going to be using it this afternoon in the circle of chairs over here. We're going to be creating charged water with manifestation energy in the water using this powerful tool. And so you'll be able to take a bottle of that with you, and whatever it is that you want to have happen as your part of our transmutation into a higher realm, use this water with your intentions and expect some good things.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So I'd love to give everyone or anyone an opportunity to ask a question. Does anyone, I'll take one or two, have a question for Brian? Yeah, Carol.
There was a book that came out and it seemed like disinformation. It was on it was on Roswell, and they were saying that Stalin made the people who were in the craft with other scientists. Why did something like that come out now, since we know it's disinformation? What are they trying to hide that's happening?
Was this before or after Hitler went to Argentina?
Who knows? But anyway, the book came out in 2011. It's in the Hendersonville Library.
Yeah.
And it just read so weird that something
Yeah.
like this would come out over 50 years later.
Yeah. Well, the people who would be disadvantaged by actually dealing with what seems to be the truth in these matters will go to odd lengths to ruin people, to put out information that can mislead people. They will do everything. People have been, their careers have been ruined, all sorts of things, and much information has been brought out that is just absolutely not right. And one of the, I think, hallmarks of such information is that it is scary.
Yeah.
And one of the things we understand about the way things work in mind control and so on, like one of the states that if you were in that state, you are most vulnerable to being brainwashed, that state is fear. So you turn on Fox News or say, oh, scared of this, scared of this, scared of that. You know, it's all fear, okay? And books like that are fear feeders. They are saying, well, you know, the aliens are going to eat our gizzards, you know, you got to worry about this. Doesn't mean they're all light and love out there. As above, so below. We see a lot of stuff here on Earth, and the laggards and whatnot. I mean, there's the flowers, and then there's the dung heaps. So we see that out there in the universe too. Fortunately, the stronger ones are in charge, and we are protected by a group of them called the Guardian Alliance, and there's others, and the Great White Brotherhood. It has nothing to do with color of skin. It has to do with the color of the aura. We have a lot of allies out there. and they protect this planet. They correct some of the errors that we make with pollution and all kinds of stuff. These folks are keeping genetic copies of all living things on Earth, so that when we eliminate species at some point, if they need to reseed the planet, they have the inventory, and they can put the kiwi birds back and the dodos and whatever that are out there. So we have allies, but at the same time, we open the doors to these people that don't have such lofty ideals, and their souls are installed in soul containers like ours around the world. And some of them, once those laggards got here, some folks from other places like Orion and some other places out there that are more warlike and competitive, they brought their DNA into the mix here on Earth. And the fact that we see a very competitive, warlike world today may in part be related to genetic components that have come in from more warlike factions out there. But they only seem to be in charge, and the folks that are into light and love are in the majority, and we are protected. And once you understand that these folks are there, and you just need to kind of put up your protective walls in an energetic way, and don't allow them to get under your skin and affect you and all that, then you can see a book like that and say, well, this is not for me. And if you want to just drop it in the can on your way out from the library, I wouldn't mind.
That's great.
So one more question. Anyone have a question? Yeah.
With the 3 areas that you've separated out, is it not possible that they're all happening at the same time? Because the energies that I'm feeling coming into the planet are just enormous. And I think that they're feeding also our need for freedom, and that the Occupy movement, all of that is stimulated and supported by the energies coming from the center of the universe.
Right. It's not lockstep.
Right. Okay.
It's easier, I think, to think about this 2012 point as kind of a point of maximum change on our way from the 4th to the 5th world. And then it goes from transition to transformation to transmutation, just as a way of kind of getting a handle on this.
Right.
But if this is a multi-lane highway, there's the high-speed lane, and there's the exit lane, and all the ones in between, and there's folks on all of them. And so some people are out there transmuting right now, and a lot of folks in this room are probably doing that. We went through transition 20 years ago. Okay? So I think it's all an individual thing. But a vast majority, I think, of the souls on the planet are going to be at least going through this stepwise progression into higher things.
Very cool. Well, we're going to have to do this again, because I'm thinking of a lot of questions I'd like to ask. But anyway, for now, we'll call it a day, and you are just wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been great, and thank you all for coming.